Okay, so let's review, right? We have two main themes in Hasidic stories, right? We have the one where, remember, they are trying to seek the sparks of light that are stuck on the klipot that are spread out throughout the universe, right? The klipot, remember, these are the shards of these original vessels, right? So these sparks are spread out everywhere. They're clinging to the material. This is really important. I want to re-emphasize that. They're clinging to the material, which means we have to go through the material to get to them. We can't bypass life. We have to enter life. We have to enter the materiality of our lives. And which means we might get our hands dirty in the process. Yes, right? We have to be capable of penetrating life, all of it, not just, living in our sheltered bubble, right? We have to step out. And that's the first thing. So first thing, right, that's the goal of the Hasidic stories. That's the goal of the Hasidic rabbis, is to gather those sparks, right? So first thing we have to do before we can gather any spark is to see them, right? So the first task of the great Hasid, right, which we are all becoming, is to see the sparks in the people. And klipot, remember, these are the shards, the broken pieces of the vessel that's burst open because of the light of creation. So first, so a lot of these stories are teaching us this particular gaze, right? They're refining our eyesight so we can begin to locate within materiality the light. And then, of course, it's not enough to see it. We also have to draw it out. We have to release the sparks from the klipot, right? Release the light from the darkness. This is another way to say we have to release God from his entrapment in reality, in the world, right? For the Hasidim, in many ways, they describe God, right? Subtly, they're not going to say it like that, but God, in a way, is trapped in the material world, is trapped, right? The light is another word for God, right? So God is trapped, and there are certain ways we can act that can release the divine power in our reality, in our lives, in our beings, right? So this is really about releasing divine light, right? Or power, or even God, right? This notion, again, I mentioned this last time, this notion of redeeming God, releasing God, untying God's hands, right? This is a notion you will find in Buber, in Levinas, in Rosenzweig, right? This will continue. This idea that through ethics, we release the divine presence. We open up a space for God. We welcome God. These are all themes that are going to come back over and over again when we study the last three authors, right? That there are things we can do to ensure or to protect the divine presence in this world. And if we don't do them, there is no God, at least not here, right? So in a way, God's very existence depends on our actions. This is the corollary, right? Let me say that again. God's very existence or presence in the world is hanging on, depends, is relative to how we act, how we dwell in the world. So we are responsible, right, for the very presence of God in this world. And if we do not act in these ways, if we do not know how to release the sparks, God simply will not exist, right? At least not here. We will have no presence of God. We are the guardians of the divine light in this world. And this divine light is protected and guarded through a certain way of engaging with the world and engaging with people, which we're going to see over and over again in Buber, in Levinas, and so forth, right? Okay, so we have to, so last time we didn't yet talk about, right? We talked about there's an action, a way of acting, but we don't know what is it. Remember, I left you hanging, right? We know it's not what we do, right? It's not about keeping all the right commandments, right? It's not about being a very strict, pious Jew, right? Because anyone can do this. Remember, they are democratizing spirituality. Anybody, right? Remember, the Hasidim are trying to reach the peasants. They want to reach the people who are really needed the most, right? And so this action is not what you're doing. It's not about studying. It's not about keeping all the commandments. It's not about being the perfect rabbi or the perfect Hasid. Anybody can do this because it's not the what, it's how you do the action. So it's irrelevant what you're doing, it's how you do it. And today we're going with the Sir of Lublin. We're going to see what is this how, right? That we can all do no matter what we become, right? And I really think that this teaching can be really universalized, right? You can be even a non-Jew and follow this teaching and do what you do in the way they're describing, and thereby release the sparks, right? You don't have to be Jewish, right, or even believe in God to release the sparks, because now what you do is how you do it. And so if you're even, we're gonna see here, you can be a sinner and release the sparks. There's an actual story like that. I know it's disturbing, right? You can actually be, if you're a great sinner, you can actually in the way that you sin, right? You can release these sparks. So all the more so if you're a nice person, but maybe doing something more secular, even that action, if it is performed in the right way, you're a dancer, you're an actor, you're, a business person, you're, I don't know, who knows, an artist, right? Journalist. It's how you do that, right? Doesn't have to be pious action, right? Yes.
They have the Baal Shem Tov story where he breaks the Sabbath to not antagonize the person.
Yeah, exactly. So that's even another, right? This is another way of saying there are more important things, right? Than the what, right? Is the how. How do I usher in the Sabbath, right? Do I usher it by, creating conflict, or do I usher? So exactly, that's a good example. Okay, so I've chosen a few stories again, which we will work on together, right? Don't leave me all alone here. And we're gonna all kind of, find different ways of seeing this, but always with these things in mind. So we'll start with number one, seeing the sparks, right, in the kippot. I start with the first story on page 315. This is the story on the merry sinner. It's a great story. So I'm going to retell it, right, the bottom of page 315. So you have this, in Lublin, right, there lived a great sinner. And he was actually best friends with the rabbi. They were friends. The rabbi actually enjoyed this guy. They would spend tons of time drinking together in the tavern and talking. And then the disciples of the rabbi were like, what are you doing? Don't you know he's a great sinner? What are you doing hanging out with this guy? Right? So the rabbi answers a very strange answer. Before I tell the answer, I just want to address one of the things. I think one of you said that last time. I think the answer is here. Why is it that the Hasidic communities nowadays, right, are not that open, right? Actually, then they were not open either. Look at the disciples. Like, why are you talking to him? I've ever been in high school where this is high school. Why are you talking to her? Why are you talking to him? Right? They have this kind of what is it called? Clique mentality. Right?
My high school was a lot nicer.
All American high schools. It was better. Your high school.
Yeah.
Good. It's New York. Yeah. So you can sense the cliquishness of the disciples. So I think the answer to your question is that most people are not like that. It's very few individuals who are able to see beyond the walls of the community, right? And these are the stars, right, that we're studying. But in general, the average disciple, the average rabbi would be like, no, what are you doing, right? So that's probably why we haven't yet had a new star, right, who thinks, and this is very elevated beings. This is not typical of the community itself. We see constantly the rabbi is clashing with his disciples because of what he's doing, right? And here we have the perfect example of the disciples saying, why are you talking to this sinner? Which is what most community would say. And he's saying, I love this guy. So here are the two reasons why he loves this guy, right? First of all, he says, you know how I love joy and hate depression, right? So he loves this, what he loves about this guy is that guy is so happy. So, okay, so that makes sense, right? But then he goes deeper and it becomes a little more disturbing what he says. He says, I love this because this guy is also consistent in his sinning. That's basically what he's saying. He's saying a lot of people, they sin, they repent, back and forth. This guy, he never repented once. He's just, right? He's just so, what does he say? He's, he knows no regrets, no doldrums, and lives in his happiness as in a tower, right? So this guy doesn't go, there's no repentance in this guy, and I admire that. Whoa, okay, so now we're getting into murky territory. What is he saying? Okay, so now I'm gonna ask you, what are the two reasons, right? Where are the sparks? There's the joy, which I think you explained very nicely. I think it was you, right? That it was the expansion.
more specific?
Last time, I think
Maybe.
I think we had a moment where you clarified that for me. So the joy, that's easy. So let's go over the joy quickly, and then we'll go into the non-repentance, right? Where is the spark in the non-repentance? But first of all, let's remind us maybe, why is his joy so important to the rabbi? What is so holy about his joy? Go ahead.
I think what I said last time was that like joy is like outwards and opens you up, whereas like I'm not saying like
Yep.
negative emotions like bring you in on yourself more.
Exactly, right. Opens you up. And what happens when you open? Think in terms of Maimonides, in terms of Spinoza. What happens when you open?
More knowledge, more power.
And there's more than that. You're right, but take Maimonides. What happens when your mind opens? Yes. Exactly, right? We are really, for all these people, it's a vessel type philosophy, right? The more we open, the more the divine light can flow in, right? So if you're open, if you're joyful, meaning open, remember, joy is what opens us up. Joy opens us up even physically, biochemically, it opens us up, right? Our bodies shift when we are in joy, right? So joy in a way opens the heart, opens the mind, opens the body. And anytime there's an opening, if we see God as a flux, right, which we did in Maimonides, and Spinoza also mentioned God as flux, then God flows wherever there's an opening. Ooh, a crack, let me go here. There's usually no openings, just flat, right? But occasionally there's an opening and God will flow no matter who is the opening. This is what's interesting about this. You don't have to be anything. You open, God is there. Boom, you can be the greatest sinner, right? Watch this. Boom, he's open, God is there somehow. There is a divine spark in that guy, right? So it doesn't matter who you are, what you believe. If you're open, Maimonides already instructed us in this way, right? If you're open, the divine influx will flow in. So joy, in a way, is very holy because that is the ultimate opening. You are at your broadest, and then God can fully flow, right? The divine light can flow, and you become, in a way, moving from all your actions are divine, right? Okay, but now let's go to the other more problematic aspect. This guy, he says, doesn't repent, go back, repent, go back. Oh, I love that guy. I think there is holiness in that. Wow. Okay, so let's see if we can pull him out.
I think it's because the guy is true to himself. It says a lot more about him than the person who sins, repents, sins, and repents. That means he never learned anything from his repentance.
Yeah.
If he's going to repent, then it should mean that he will never, at least try to never commit the sin again. But then he goes and does it again. Whereas this guy who's such a great sinner, he understands himself. He says, I'm just gonna end up doing it again anyway, so I might as well just stop.
Okay, so where's the holiness in that? You're sinning.
He's open and he's true to himself.
Okay, so that's interesting. So the more true to yourself you are, the more holy you are. Where did we see this? We saw this somewhere else, and then I'll get you, Yadgar. Where did we see that to be true? As when you become, the more true to yourself you become, the more access to the divine you have. Which text? Who was out of touch with himself? Thank you. Job, completely out of touch with himself, right? And became finally true to himself, embraced his anger, embraced his emotions, right? Burst open, completely true to himself, direct access to God, right? So there's something about being true to ourselves, right? Being really in touch with our emotions, in touch with who we are. That is what will bring us, in a way, closer, right, to the divine revelations. I like that. Yes, Yadgarov and then Feder. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, it's kind of like self-awareness. He knows himself enough to say, I'm not going to repent.
Okay, so it's similar, right? Self-awareness, connection to self, right? No connection to self, no connection to God, right? They're connected, right? You can't, the issue with many religions is they disconnect us from ourselves. Be more, right? He's saying here, this is who I am, and I'm going to embrace it. Boom. We're in the middle of existentialism. He acknowledges himself. He embraces himself fully. At that moment, the divine light is revealed, right? There's an interesting quote by Abraham Heschel. You will read. Where he says, the goal of the human being is to be both human and holy, right? Not just human, not just holy, but both, right? In other words, don't try to be just holy up there like an angel. Don't try to be just human. It's a little different from this. This guy's purely human, right? But the idea is once you come to terms with your humanity, you are closest to God than somebody who doesn't come to terms with their humanity. So I like that, what you guys are saying, right? So let me say that again, right? Once you embrace yourself in everything that you are, right? And you welcome it and you accept it and you embrace it. At that moment, you're closest to God than someone who is trying so hard to be somebody else, right? That's an idea here. Okay, Feders, help us with this guy.
I was gonna say, I have a question on the first interpretation from like the fact that he's happy, which is joy. So I feel like based off of Spinoza, we said that joy comes from like a true understanding of like when you're actually accurately understanding things, right? And not just like in your own framework. So I feel like based off my understanding of sin is like something which is like, let's say wrong, or like something which is like objectively like wrong or like not good or not the right thing. And if this guy is engaged in that, then it wouldn't bring joy no matter how engaged in it he is. It's not the true understanding.
Very good, very good. So perhaps what the text is saying is maybe he's seen as a sinner, but he isn't, right? Because very often we look at people and we judge. Remember Spinoza, right? Says evil, good and evil is in the head, right? So maybe the Hassidim have been judging him as a sinner, but because he's in such joy, one wonders if he's really sinning, right? Because sin is missing the mark, is ignorance, right? So maybe, right, what the text is saying is that sometimes we see people as sinners and they're maybe not really sinners, right? Maybe it's in our head that they're sinners but we see joy, meaning they should put us into question. Okay, if he's in joy, then maybe he's got something going here that I should pay attention to, right? Yeah.
That raises the question why he's called a sinner. Like, is he getting laid too?
He doesn't fit it with the framework of the community,
Get
right?
specific here.
Doesn't get specific. But remember, that's what
It's
Spinoza
not
says.
killing anyone.
Right, Spinoza, exactly. Spinoza is saying the good and evil, it's in your head. You determine this is good based on you, right? So maybe the community is judging him based on their worldview, right?
You're jealous.
And maybe, yes. Okay, good. Anybody else want to salvage? There's the last story we're going to do is going to illuminate this one even more, right? Yes.
What about joy or participating in like ignorance? This can also make someone joyous. So how do we know like this? So what does it mean for joy to be like one to be joyous when they participate in truth or self-truth?
Okay, let's look at that. Imagine a child. How many of you were more joyful as children than now? Curious. Me, it was the opposite.
I was not a joyful child.
Not a
Not
joyful
perhaps now.
child. So, but
Not
anyways,
perhaps
as a children, since you guys know this, you've tasted the joy of childhood, right? You know less, right? You know nothing. And yet you're joyful. So how do you explain that based on Spinoza? Let's see if anyone can pull that off. How do you explain the joy of the child who knows nothing? Yeah.
Because joy comes from not knowing. It's not because the more you learn about something, the more exposed you are to the world. The more you expose you are
Exactly.
to the world changes you.
Exactly. It's not knowledge, it's ability to, it's openness. Intelligence is defined not as what is inside the vessel of intelligence, it's defined you're intelligent when you're wide open. You're not intelligent if you have a lot of information in your head. That's not the sign of intelligence, right? Intelligence means you're wide open. The child is wide open. Child is always, picking up something, eating it, going over here, going places he shouldn't go. That's perfect. That's exactly how we should be, right? Like the child. And that's why the child is so happy because he's so wide open, right? So intelligence has nothing to do with how much knowledge you've accumulated. In fact, remember the rabbi, the great grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, he says this, too much knowledge, too much clutter, no creativity, no joy, you could say, right? So I think what Spinoza means by knowledge is an attitude. It's not a content. Do you see what I'm saying? Does that make sense? So you're open, you're constantly questioning and trying to see the other perspective, the other side. That's when you are intelligent. That's when you're joyful. So the child, even though he has no content, he's ultimately completely happy, right? Yeah.
Did you ever watch The Sopranos?
Which one?
Sopranos.
Who?
The
Sopranos.
No.
So
It's an HBO show.
Okay.
So the main character is part of the mafia, but he just keeps on doing terrible things consistently. But just to make himself feel better about it, he goes to a therapist. So then he just feels validated and he just keeps on doing terrible things. It's kind of similar.
And the question is he joyful because that's the sign?
No,
right?
he's very depressed.
So there's something off, right? But if he was joyful, then we would know he has hit up on something, right? Good, good. Is Lucifer joyous?
No, in the show, he goes to the therapist, but like he does bad things and he just tells her about it. That's wrong.
Okay, so at least he's consistent. So
Yeah.
so we're gonna say, remember, these stories are meant to provoke, right? They're meant to really, they're provocative, right? They're meant to make us uncomfortable and to make us squirm, right? To teach us something deeper. So it's good that he's making us squirm. Okay, let's squirm with another story. Here's the next one on page 316. This one is a very beautiful story, actually. This is a story about a rabbi who was in the habit, this is the bottom of 316. He was in the habit of anytime there was a beggar or a poor wayfarer, he would invite him and bring him food and really welcome the guy. Okay, so that makes sense, right? And we know from the story why he did that. Anybody know why he did that? Why the rabbi served the beggar, why he gave him food and so forth? Anybody know from the story why he's doing that? Story answered it in top of 17.
I think that he's comparing it to like something done on like I guess Day of Atonement.
That's later. First, there's the first answer, right? What people know, and then he gives a deeper answer, right? So hold that thought. We're coming to that. Who can answer what the beggar knows? The beggar knows why he's welcome. Why is it? What's the reason? He understands that it's normal that the rabbi welcomed him like that. What does he mention here? What does the beggar say? Yeah.
Oh God.
Okay, right, exactly, right. He knows that the rabbi is living under, an ethics, right? He has to fulfill certain commandments, like welcoming the stranger, because in the world of the rabbi, the stranger is the envoy of God. Okay, notice that, right? The stranger is a messenger of God. We have also even, I think in the Talmud they talk about Abraham when he welcomes the three angels, right? That this is how we ought to be because the stranger could be an angel. Right? Okay, that's beautiful in itself, right? But then something more happens in the story. Then he sees the rabbi is not only serving him, but he's picking the dishes and then washing them. He's like, what are you doing? That's not part of the deal, right? That this is not part of the divine command. And then the rabbi gives a very peculiar answer, which we need to explain because he's drawing from the liturgy he's drawing from the religious aspect of Judaism. He says, listen, just like the high priest carries out the coal from the holiest place during the Day of Atonement, I too am doing this right now. So we need to explain this a little bit. What is happening? What is this ritual he's referring to? Can anyone explain that to me? The coal pan from the Holy of Holies. Who can explain this to the class? What's going on here?
I don't know that.
Okay, exactly. So some of us don't know this. So who can explain? Feder?
I mean, I think on the Day of Atonement, the high priest, I guess, goes into the Holy of Holies, which is like the room in the temple, like the most holy room, I guess. And he does like a incense offering, and then he like takes out the pan with it afterwards, and maybe that's what he's saying.
And why is he doing that?
For an atonement for the nation.
Okay, and who is in the Holy of Holies normally? Who is the only person allowed in the Holy of Holies?
No one, only him on that day.
And
God.
exactly, right? So we have so he's referring to a temple. Here's my temple. Sorry, it's terrible. So cute. So we have the back part of the temple. Nobody can enter, separated by a curtain, right? In that back part of the temple, this was the Holy of Holies, right? This is called the Holy of Holies, where nobody goes, right? Holy of Holies. Why? Because the divine presence is there. This is the bedroom of God, right? The residing space of God. So you don't go in ever, except once a year. The high priest goes in to clean that place, right? He brings some incense, he brings some coal, and he enters that place. And by the way, it's very dangerous. He might die. Anybody, entering the space of God might actually die. Okay, so, and when he enters that space, it is during a very specific ritual, which is a ritual where not only the priest is being forgiven, but the whole world is being cleansed of sin. That's the meaning of the Day of Atonement. We have to recognize the Day of Atonement is not just the cleansing of the priest of the sins. It's not just the cleansing of the community of Israel. it symbolizes the cleansing of the whole world. So as he performs that ritual, he is in a way cleansing the whole world of sin, right? Once a year that happens. Okay, now we know this a little more. Why is the rabbi taught, what's he saying? By saying, when I take your dishes to the kitchen, it is like me taking the coal out of the Holy of Holies and bringing it outside. What is he actually saying to the beggar? Which is very, very profound. Yes.
Strangers.
So we know that from before, right? What's more here? We know he welcomed him because he's a messenger of God, but now it goes deeper. He's carrying the dishes out. He's doing something more. There's a meaning behind that action. What is he actually saying about the stranger when he says, I'm carrying your dishes like I'm carrying the coal out of the Holy of Holies? Who is he identifying the stranger with at that moment? So what you're gonna say? Exactly. At that moment, the stranger is identified with God, right? He is serving the stranger like he is serving God, not just the messenger of God. He is serving the stranger like he is serving God in the Day of Atonement. And in the way that he's serving the stranger, he's bringing atonement to the whole world. It's a powerful action that has cosmic repercussions, right? So this is so important, this moment in that story, because when we go to Levinas, we're going to have the same idea of the stranger, the other, being or carrying the traits of God, right? Being in a way the manifestation of God on earth, right? So this is a thought that will continue as we study the others, right? So the stranger is actually God. When you welcome the stranger, you don't welcome just a messenger or angels, you welcome God himself, right? Yes.
Was it the stranger is God? Because I read this more as that the actual action is like being equated with that action of the atonement. Not in the sense that it's like serving God necessarily, but in the sense this is like a great action to be done. And the action itself, like you're saying, is, it's in the how. That's how you find God.
Yeah, you can totally, that works. Remember, these stories, you can have many, right? Many facets, right? So actually he could be saying my action of serving you is as potent, right? As the action of serving God. And in a way, as I'm serving you, I am atoning for the whole world. You could even say that. So we can go even further, right? When you receive the stranger, when you welcome the other, you are in a way welcoming God. What happens if you stop welcoming the stranger? What happens to God? If we follow the logic, what happens to God if we stop welcoming the stranger in our lives?
You're shutting them out.
Exactly. The presence of God depends on how we welcome each other. This is again a very powerful theme that will continue in Jewish existentialism, right? So let me say it again. The presence of God in this world depends not how we welcome him through prayer and worship and commandments. No, it depends how we welcome each other, right? If you want God to be in a given space or in a given community or in a given household, it will depend not on how loving you are to God, right? Not on how much faith you have in God. It will depend how you treat each other. How we treat each other is what is going to determine how much of God is going to be there, right? And if so it really, that this is very interesting, right? That God's very presence hangs upon the way we treat each other, which we're going to see over and over again, right? Yes.
I have a question kind of about that. The risk of dying just for visiting the space of God, it seems a little bit weird. Can you elaborate that a little bit?
But the encounter between the human and the divine in the Hebrew Bible, when it's a direct encounter, it's terrifying, and you just melt, right? So it can be potentially a terrifying encounter if God shows up, right? Thankfully, it was just a cloud, right? So yeah, it's usually a very powerful encounter, which can be so powerful you drop dead. Right? If you see the prophets when they have their visions of God, they're in no way dropping; they're on the floor. They have to be picked up by an angel. Here, sit and watch, right? So that's the encounter is very powerful, and physiologically, it's hard to endure it, I guess, right? Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, so good. So this is a very interesting topic, which we'll see again over and over again. Let's go now. There's two more stories I want to do, which is the coachman, and then the story with the word patchwork. It's really, I love those two. So 309 with the coachman. So again, a little bit on joy there. So you have read a bunch of Hasidim. They go to visit a rabbi. They're doing, the work of God. And they're traveling in a what? Stagecoach? Is that what these things are called? Anyways, horses and a coach. And then there's a coachman, right? Who's just a nobody. He's nobody. He's just leading the horses. Anyways, how did they come to know this story? Oh yeah. So they go into the house of the seer of Lublin, right? And let's see, how did the rabbi get it?
Coach gave a note.
What did he
He
say?
gave a note with the
Yes.
name on it.
Ah, really? Okay, thank you. So the coachman somehow does something strange. Gives them, here's a paper with my name, show it, or maybe to get some blessing or something from the rabbi, right? So they go in, and they give the name, and the rabbi is, take a step back. He's like, oh my goodness, the light of God is shining so powerfully from this name. And the students are like, what? He's just the coachman. What are you seeing? He's nobody, right? And the rabbi said, no, his soul is shining out like pure light, right? So they're very perplexed, right? So after, they have their session with the rabbi, they study a little bit, and they go back, they go back to the coach, and the coachman is not there. It starts well. And so they go looking for him, and they find him at a wedding, dancing, right? Having fun, drinking, dancing. And so, they call him over, they say, come on, let's go, we want to go. So he comes up, and then he tells them what happened. He says, I was sitting there, I was kind of bored, and I heard there was a wedding nearby, so I went. And then, I just had the time of my life. And they're like, okay. And then he's like, and then at one point, the bride, it turned out she didn't have enough money to pay for something in the wedding. What was it? A prayer shawl. She's supposed to buy a prayer shawl to the groom. That's the custom. And she didn't have enough money because she was an orphan. And he said, and then, it just spontaneously, it just happened that I had money and it was just the right amount. And I just gave it away. And that just made me so happy. Okay, and so then they go home, and that's the story. Okay, so now tell me a little bit, let's look at the spark. Where there's joy, right? Again, we come to the theme of joy. What more do we learn about joy here that we didn't know before? Yes?
Joy inspires us to do good things.
Okay, very good, right? We didn't know this, right? Joy, if you want to be a good person, don't cultivate goodness, cultivate joy, period. Be right again. I'm brought back to Sadhguru, and I'm sorry. I know this is like totally out of context. This guy, right, who's one of the most prominent voices of wisdom in India right now, right? He said so. I just love the way he said it. It really helped me. He's like, you want to be pleasant to others, be pleasant inside. If you're not feeling pleasant inside, how are you going to be pleasant to others? Cultivate the inside. Cultivate your joy. Cultivate your well-being, and then spontaneously you will do the right thing. Right? It's very similar, remember, to St. Augustine. I think you mentioned that. What's that really annoying quote I always pull on you? Anybody remember it? By St. Augustine?
I remember the translation.
Go ahead.
Curve towards one
Oh,
side.
that's one aspect. There's another quote though, that I always throw to my students just to irritate them. Anybody? Love, and what? I haven't done this to you?
Oh, it's on the
Yeah. What is it?
It's like
You did that. You're one of
love
you
and
did.
then anything else, follow your desires.
Yeah, love and do what you want. And everybody's like, what? But if you're in love, whatever you will do will spontaneously be loving, right? So in a way, you can do what you want if it's coming from a place of love. As soon as you leave love and you do what you want, then we have a problem. But if you're a loving person and you're doing everything out of love, it will be naturally the right action. That's what St. Augustine means. Same thing here. If you're joyful, whatever you will do will come from a divine space and will be divine, right? Because joy is God. So if you're filled with God, whatever you will do is going to be filled with the divine, and therefore you can't go wrong if you're joyful, right? Yes.
Sorry, I think I remember it was love God in the Portugal. Is that the same?
Oh, yeah, it could be, yeah. And I have to check.
Wouldn't that be different?
In his mind, it's the same, right? He doesn't mean love like eros, right? I love you, like I'm attracted to you, and then I do what I want. It's not gonna work, right? He means love like, the divine love, right? Once I love like that, or once I'm in that love, then I will, whatever I do to you is going to be great, right? In that sense. But no, I have to check. You're right. You can Google it if you want. I'm curious now. Okay, so that's a very interesting little extra thing that we learned, that in a way, if you want, and Spinoza, by the way, says exactly the same thing. He says we should not have to cultivate virtue because joy is virtue. Do you remember that last passage we did where he says we are trying to, to restrain our emotions, we're trying to cultivate our passions, we're trying to be better people. He says no, just cultivate joy, cultivate knowledge, right? Stretch your mind, And once you're filled with joy, naturally virtue will emerge. He says it in the very last part of his book, right, that we studied. So that's why he says in the text, joy is virtue. There is no, you don't need to cultivate virtue. Once you have joy, you are virtuous, right? That's the same idea of Spinoza. It's very striking how these just build on each other. Okay, great. Now here's the last story that I found. That story, I'm so glad I found it in here because I had read it somewhere else. It took me hours to find it. Do you see how big this book is? It took me hours to find this damn story, but finally I did. It's the story here on page 316 called Patchwork. And I've pondered this story for so long, like it doesn't leave my mind. Let me tell you the story again. So there's a student who decided he was going to fast. Okay, it's good, full of good intentions, right? So he's trying to fast, and then he kind of like gets tempted and he wants to drink something, right? And he's about to sin, right, to break his fast and drink something, and then he resists, right? And so that's great so far. But then after he resisted, he starts feeling proud about what he did. So now he's like, damn, now I'm feeling proud. Okay, I gotta break this. So then he drinks just to get rid of the pride. And then he goes to the rabbi and he tells him all this, right? And the rabbi just dismisses him with one word, patchwork. And that's it. Okay, that's the story. No explanation. Okay, so let's go and see what is wrong. Why did the rabbi dismiss him? What did he mean by patchwork? What's happening? The poor student is trying to do his best. He's trying to fast. Then temptation comes, he resists. That's good. Then he feels pride and he's like, oh no, I have to break this pride, so I'm gonna drink, right? So then I have nothing to be proud about. So you can see he's full of good intentions, right? He's really trying to be a good person. And the rabbi just waves him off, like, you know, and one word, one despising word, patchwork. All right, explain to me the story. Why is the rabbi not happy with the student? And why does he say the word patchwork? What's happening? What's the meaning? That's a hard one, right? It took me weeks. I was thinking about it. I was like, wow, that's an interesting story. Yes.
I've heard the proverb that is the same. It was hell's paved with good intentions.
Yeah, hell is paved with good intentions.
I didn't get it at this point.
There's a connection, right? You have the right intention, right? And yet he's just doing, what is he doing that is annoying the rabbi so much? We had a similar story. We should be good at this by now. Yes.
Well, I thought that he didn't drink water. So I thought that was a patchwork, meaning like the fact that he stopped, that he went to stop his pride and his thirst went away. That was the patchwork there. I didn't take it as a bad thing. I took it as
Oh, you took it as a good thing?
Yeah, I feel like patchwork, like patchwork, like this first, like you said, it was the desire and then like the pride, and that kind of like.
Okay. So he's doing like a quilt. Quilts are nice. Okay, no, I'm going to give you that interpretation. Why not? I'm the opposite one, but we can do this because we're used to it by now, right? We know that there's always multiple interpretations. So you can say, yes, the rabbi actually thought, oh, this is a beautiful patchwork. It's a beautiful quilt that you're doing here with your life. I tend to think the rabbi was not too happy based on other stories. So I see your...
There's implication the rabbi was able to intuitively pick up that he went through that ordeal before the student even told him anything. Like, it seems the student didn't tell him what happened. The rabbi just somehow knew.
Yeah. Remember, it's the Sira Lublin. The Sira Lublin can see through your soul. So he knew what happened, and he just dismissed him with the word patchwork.
My intuition tells me that patchwork is basically claiming that some divine force cured that thirst before that person would sin, because at least that person
so y'all are still thinking this guy
is. It seems to be a positive thing.
Okay. So two for positives. Okay, yes.
That's why I'm caught up in it. It feels like originally, whenever I hear the word patchwork, it's like you just randomly put things together, right? So I feel like the intention could be, it's like he doesn't have the actual original idea, and he's just putting together these different rules instead of justifying the core thing and knowing what the truth is, right?
There's something off here, yeah.
But at the same time too, it's like why didn't he drink it the last time? He was going to
Yeah,
break
yeah.
the fast and he doesn't. So it's kind of
So you're right. In the end, he doesn't break the fast. I made a mistake. I made him drink, but I checked as you were talking. You're right. He lost his thirst. But even though he didn't break the fast, remember, it's not the what, it's the how, right? So he fasted, yes, but the rabbi is not proud of him. Yeah, you didn't break the fast, but actually, your how. There's an issue with your how. What's wrong with his how? Yes.
I mean, like, I feel like he's kind of saying, like, he sort of has, like, the wrong idea about, like, what sin and desire are. Like, because I kind of feel like he's saying that him resisting his urge to drink, that kind of, like, doesn't do anything for anybody, I feel like him just resisting that, like, him self-imposing a fast and then feeling proud over, like, a resistance, I feel like that's just something more internal that doesn't do anything for anybody.
That's true. The rabbis used to say, why torture yourself? Be happy, right? So there's a lot of stories like that where the rabbis are like, you stop being so austere, right? So maybe there's some of that. Okay. I'm still not convinced yet by what y'all are saying about my theory that the patchwork is problematic. Yes.
I feel like the rabbi called him patchwork because of the way he interpreted the rules, the way he chose to act, and the way he chose to interpret the rules or the commandments. He called them patchwork because he just threw a bunch of them together and thought that this would be good, when in reality he doesn't, like my father, he doesn't know the true purpose of them.
Okay, yeah, you're on the right track. Look at this guy, right? What? Remember, the rabbi is not criticizing the fact he's fasting, not here. He does that in other stories, but here it's like the fasting is how he fasted. What is wrong with the way he's going about this fast? That's the key here. Yes.
It's purely by will, right? I think, who was it? It was, maybe it's Kant who says this, where when you have a goal, maybe when you're on a diet or something, you can't have it be purely led by will, right? Because at some point your will will be exhausted.
Simone Weil, maybe, no?
I've only heard this before.
Maybe Kant, yeah, sure.
And so you need something to supplement the will, right? Because the will is only temporary,
Okay.
right? When you write a paper, you're so eager, right? Because you have this beautiful idea. At some point, this eagerness will disappear. You need something else to propel you forward. And so this person who's going on this fast has not engaged the fast as something beyond your will, right? It's
Interesting.
purely restrictive.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
when you go on diets, people tell you this is a lifestyle change, right? So they get you out of this idea that this is purely like a physical kind of restraining. And so they'll say, instead of taking out food, you want to put more food, but that food would be healthier, right?
Got it. Yeah.
And so you develop a kind of oneness with the fast, right? You partake in this new lifestyle. And so when he was about to drink, this kind of like the gap between him and the drinking, right? Because he was very close to, that's the resistance taking hold, right? And it's this moment where he was about to, but did not. That's indicating that this was all purely will, and he has nothing else spiritual to supplement.
You would have been a good life coach for this guy. You can really explain to him how to fast. You got to be one with the fast. You got to see all the things you can have. So that's good advice. Yet I'm still not seeing. This came up in the other story. We had a similar story that pinpointed a similar problem with the how. You want to try? Last person.
Well, there is a potential problem with the fact that he was like rationalizing breaking the fast. He is engaging in a rationalization process, like trying to find like a reason to like break the rules, and so he comes up with this.
Y'all are still not getting it. Remember, what was the first story about? It's the same thing as the first story. What was the first story we did? The sinner. What was good about the sinner?
He was seeking joy.
More than that? More than that? He was sinning and no regrets. Thank you. What? So now can you see what's wrong with this guy?
You should have just drank it and then
just stick with whatever you're doing. You drink, okay, but the guy is back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. This, then that, this, then that. No consistency. And I would add, no commitment. This is the key, right? The problem is not what, is how. How consistent are you with what you do?
He didn't drink it.
No, but he kept on going back and forth.
Yeah, but ultimately he was committed to not drinking it. That's why he ended up not drinking it.
But in his mind, he's going back and forth. He's in the action, yes, ends up being flawless.
What's wrong with contemplation?
We're gonna see. We're gonna talk about that. No, he didn't. I made a
No,
mistake.
no, he didn't.
He wanted to. Inside, he's like this, right? So what's the problem? Okay, so let's look at that a little bit. Why is that such a problem that inside you're like this? What are you missing? And how are you, because of that, you're not releasing any sparks. Remember, we're talking about the how. We're finally touching upon this issue of the how. What is it in consistent action that releases the sparks in a way that going back and forth, not going to do it? Yeah.
You turn inward when you're just stuck deliberating all the time in your mind.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of that.
Very true.
Yeah. That's interesting. You're not outward in the action, right? You're like, kind of, going through your thoughts. That's interesting. I like that. Perso, and then
Yeah, I wonder, because whenever you're in deep thought, you kind of you retreat back
it's like
into
a
yourself,
contraction, right?
and you start noticing the things around you.
That's interesting. Yeah, I like that. Go ahead.
I recall that Jesus once advised against being lukewarm in your actions.
Okay, yes, we have that. And what he's really talking about here is why consistent action is the key here, is because it has something to do with faith. I think we can talk about that in a second. But first, let me go with the consistent action. Basically, what they're saying is whatever you're doing, if you go through with it, you will release the sparks. Okay, in other words, don't start something and then be like, oh, no, that's not it. Let me do this. Okay, let me go over here. No, that's not it. Let me go over here. No, that's a mistake. Let me go. You will never release any sparks with that attitude. However, pick anything. What the rabbis are saying, pick anything and be consistent. If you're capable of bringing that thing to its end, you will release sparks no matter what that thing is. I'll give you an example. Some of us are so scared to pick like a career or a major, right? What the rabbis are saying, pick anything. If you go all the way with that major, you will find everything that you were looking for. You will release something in you that you cannot release by constantly switching back and forth. Pick a partner, go all the way with them, and you will release sparks that you cannot release if you're constantly, this isn't the person. Let me try. Oh, no, that's not it. No, let me go. Okay, no. If anything you pick, if you go all the way with it, you will release divine sparks and you will release the divine power. You will release God in a way that you cannot release God if you're constantly going here and trying this and then doing this and then stopping, going over here, right? You're stuck. That's the definition of stuck. I have a teenager living with me right now, and I told her the story of the enchanted forest. I told her, listen, in life, doesn't matter what you pick. Right now, I told her she was stuck. She was in some kind of depression. I said, right now you're in the enchanted forest. If you want to leave the enchanted forest, pick any path and just keep walking, right? If the enchanted forest is here and you're in the middle, doesn't matter which path, pick any path. If you continue walking, you'll leave it. But if you pick a path and you're like, oh, no, that's the wrong path, let me go here. Oh, no, let me go here. Okay, no. And so you're stuck, right? And you never really release the divine power and light that you could release if you just stuck to one thing till the end, right? And so what the rabbi is saying is not the what. Whatever you pick, there's no wrong way, right? There's a wrong way of doing, but there's no wrong path. If you go all the way on this path, you will find God, or you will release God, and there will be a tremendous, amazing outburst of light if you finish what you start, right? Yes.
There's this kind of idea too, where if you go along that line of thought, right? And it's like, oh, I'm really concerned whether or not I should start becoming a serial killer. I'm gonna dive in and just start right away.
It's better to be a serial killer and finish what you started to be stuck in the enchanted forest. Remember, the stories are meant to be provocative, right? Don't take too literally, right? But they're meant to really trigger, they shock us so that we remember them, right? This is, by the way, the very definition of faith. Faith is doing the thing without stopping, not going left or right. Remember the widow in the two texts. We have Honi, the circle maker, in the Talmudic text, right? And we had the persistent widow. What was beautiful about them, why they were able to trigger God, right? God was sitting there doing nothing. They triggered God. Why? Not because they're good people and so forth, because they didn't stop asking for what they were like just pushing the same, not changing their what you call it, their script. They were just consistent. And the consistency is the very definition of faith. So the serial killer who is killing and killing and killing, he has one spark. What is it? No? What's the divine spark in the serial killer that is killing consistently?
No regret.
But what's the spark? What does he have? That's
Dedication.
faith. He has faith. He knows what faith is, right? He knows the dynamic. I'm not saying he has faith in God, but he knows how faith works. That's faith, right? Faith is not a belief. Oh, I believe in God. That's a Christian definition of faith. Is I believe this, I believe that. No, faith is a way you're walking in life. You walk persistently. You don't move. You're persistent. You will get somewhere where God will be released. You go constantly going back and forth, never God is going to be released. You will be stuck in the enchanted forest, right? So that's why these stories, right, they're provocative, but they're really teaching us about faith. That's what faith looks like. No patchwork. You pick something, you finish it, you have faith in that relationship, you finish that relationship, you finish that career path, you finish that degree. Whatever you start, you finish, right? You will release the divine sparks because you finished, right? Doesn't matter what you were doing. You could be a garbage collector. Finish that, you will release sparks, right? So that's the idea, very powerful idea here that we've seen before, right? With the Talmudic stories on faith, right? I think there was a question. Was that you? Was that you?
Yeah, I was gonna say, there seems to be a presence in commitment. So when you're committed to something, no, when you're not committed and you're contemplating, you're
I
always
like that.
contemplating the future, the next step.
You're not
So,
there. You're
yeah,
not there.
like in the forest.
I love that.
When you go straight, you're constantly thinking, okay, maybe I should go
Mhm.
left or right, but you're never thinking, okay, where am I right now? And so you're moving towards the next step. And so, yeah, 'cause
That's great.
often when I'm contemplating, there is this inward experience, like they said. There's also a closing in, and I'm never actually present. I'm thinking about, oh my God, what am I going to do next?
Excellent.
Or just stay, or-
That's very good, right? It's a presence. Remember, being close to ourselves is what will make us spiritual, right? They're fully present in the commitment in a way that you're not fully present if you have options, right? This is why, just to close, Kierkegaard said something, he had a whole book entitled that. Purity of heart is to love one thing. That's a whole book for Kierkegaard. Let me say it again. Purity of heart is to love one thing. That's when you know you are aligned with God, that you're pure, right? That's when I'm just going to do this till the end. Right? I'm going to drink the cup till the dregs, right? That capacity, that ability that you have is the very definition of faith. If you can do that with whatever you're doing, you can do it with God, right? That's the idea. So, okay, great. We have to stop, sadly. We could go on and on. Okay, next time, Boober. Now we're going to begin to see these stories take shape in philosophy, right? So it's good we started with those stories. Let me
Which story did you start seeing the sparks from?